Laughing Loon presents Building Ootek, Part 7. The kayak pictured here is Ootek, designed and being built by Rob Max. The building shown here is a condensed version of the more detailed information in my instruction books and how-to videos available on my website. In Part 7 of Building Ootek, we'll cut out the openings for the hatches and we'll glass the interior seam between deck and hull. With the hull and deck taped together, I need to lay out the fore and aft hatch openings and cut those out so I can access the interior seam for fiberglassing. The Ootek plans include templates for the fore and aft hatch openings and numbers to show you where the placement of those are. I traced the paper templates onto the deck with a white grease pencil. I'll be reaching through the cockpit opening to glass the internal seams. I also need to cut out the shape of the cockpit opening, so here I'm using the lamination to give me a definite line for cutting with a jigsaw. To get my jigsaw in the hatch opening, I drill 4 holes in a line and then connect that with a utility knife. Now I'll be able to shove my jigsaw blade into the slot to start the cut. I scored along the inside of the white line with a utility knife before I use my jigsaw. This will create a smoother cut. I use a 32 tooth metal cutting blade in my jigsaw for a smooth cut. To make smooth curved cuts, go slowly, stop your blade occasionally, position your feet so that you're balanced, and look very closely at the cut line. Once the hatches and the cockpit coaming are cleanly cut, I have easy access to glass the interior seam. I roll out my dry seam tape, press it into the joint, straddling both deck and hull. Then I reach as far as I can up into the bow and pour a line of epoxy over the dry seam tape. Then I work the epoxy into the dry seam tape using a brush hot glued on the end of a 2-foot stick. This allows me to go right up into the bow, and a headlamp helps me to see what I'm doing. I work my way down the seam pouring epoxy and spreading it with the foam brush on the end of the 2-foot stick. The kayak is balanced on its side, so gravity will help pull the wet epoxy into the seam. I work with small batches of 3 ounces of epoxy at a time. Typically takes 3 batches of 3 ounces. Once both interior seams are glassed and cured, remove the packing tape and clean up any fresh epoxy squeeze out along the joint with a scraper. In preparation for the exterior seams, sand a band about 5 inches wide along the seam on the deck and on the hull. We'll apply fiberglass over this joint. Sanding prepares the surface for a mechanical bond with the epoxy. Round the sharp deck hull joint with a plane, and then further smooth that and round with a 60 grit sandpaper on a sanding block. I mask off a band about 2 inches from the hull deck joint and on the hull. I lay 60-inch wide strips of glass cut from my fiberglass roll on the deck loosely with weights to hold it in place, so that as I roll out the epoxy, the glass is going to move and stretch, so I don't want to tape it in place. I wet the deck surface first and then I do the hull side. Here I'm clamping veneers on the stem edge to give a visual contrast. It's much easier to have veneers suggesting a separate stem piece than it is to make a separate stem piece and strip to it. Once the epoxy on my exterior seams has cured to a leather hard stage, I use a utility knife with a brand new blade to cut right along that transition where the tape is, lifting the fiberglass into the blade more than pushing down with it. This gives me a uniform seam edge which is easy to sand. After the fill coats have cured on my exterior seams, I can cut out my day hatch opening, which runs into that seam area. On one of my boats, the rear strips didn't make it all the way to the cockpit opening, and so I covered it up with veneer like this, and it seems like everybody likes the look of this thing, so now I kind of do it as a signature piece. Glue a veneer down, tape it in place, and put a piece of wax paper over it, and put a cardboard cull and clamp. Later it'll be sanded and covered with a layer of fiberglass, fill coated, and feathered into the deck. To start construction of my cockpit coaming, I take one of the laminations which is used for the base of the coaming, and a similar one will actually be used for the lip of the coaming, but now this is trimmed to length and placed under the deck as the base for the construction of the coaming. This same piece was used to draw the line to cut out the coaming shape, so it will easily fit the shape. I mark it on the center line of the deck and trim it to fit. It's glued under the deck, and a mirror piece is fit and glued under the deck, creating the foundation of the coaming. These laminations glued under the deck create a clamping edge to attach the riser for the coaming in the next step in construction of the cockpit coaming. In Part 8 of building Ootek, we'll finish the cockpit coaming and work on magnetic hatches. For more information on my strip building techniques, see my shop tips pages at laughingloon.com. Full plans for the Sea Kayak Ootek, along with many other canoe and kayak plans, instruction books, and how-to videos are available at my website, laughingloon.com.